What is the fate of pyruvate after the glycolysis is done? I had already explained the detailed process of glycolysis in the previous video. In glycolysis, one glucose molecule is converted into two pyruvate molecules in the cell cytoplasm. And in this process, total 2 molecules of ATP are invested and 4 molecules of ATP are generated, as well as 2 molecules of NADH also generated. There are 10 reactions in this process of glycolysis. The link of part 1 video is given in the description part. Now, the NADH are generated from NAD, but in cells, there are limited supply of NAD. So, if all of the NAD are consumed at a time, the glycolysis may be stopped. So, to keep the process going smoothly, the NAD must be supplied back in sufficient amount. The fate of pyruvate as well as the supply of NAD are dependent on the presence or absence of oxygen and mitochondria inside the cell. Let's look at it in detail. When a glucose molecule enters into the cell, it undergoes glycolysis process. So pyruvate, ATP and NADH are there. If the cell does not contain the mitochondria, the pyruvate will undergo a fermentation process and it is converted into lactate or lactic acid, and the enzyme functions here is lactate dehydrogenase. And in this step, the NADH produced in the glycolysis process will come here and be oxidized back to NAD. So, the NAD will then become available again to continue the glycolysis process. And this is the scenario in anaerobic glycolysis. Now, if mitochondria are present inside the cell, the pyruvate will take another pathway. The pyruvate then will be transported into the matrix of mitochondria and will be converted into acetyl-CoA. The enzyme here is pyruvate dehydrogenase. And what happens to the NADH? The NADH will also be transported into the mitochondria. They will undergo a process called electron transport chain. During the electron transport chain process, the NADH are oxidized back to NAD. And in the presence of oxygen, in the electron transport chain process, 3 molecules of ATP are produced for 1 molecule of NADH. So end of the process, from 1 NADH, 1 NAD is supplied back and 3 ATPs are produced. I will make a video on the detailed process of electron transport chain later. So the NAD produced in these steps are supplied back to there to continue the glycolysis process. And this is the scenario of aerobic glycolysis. Now let's find the net ATP production through glycolysis process. First, I will show you the steps of glycolysis in short. One glucose molecule is converted into glucose 6-phosphate. Then glucose 6-phosphate is converted into fructose 6-phosphate. Fructose 6-phosphate is then converted into fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Fructose 1,6-bisphosphate is then cleaved into 2 molecules, a dihydroacetone phosphate molecule and a glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate molecule. The dihydroacetone phosphate can be interconverted to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. The glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is then converted into 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate, and 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is converted into 3-phosphoglycerate. 3-phosphoglycerate is then into 2-phosphoglycerate, 2-phosphoglycerate then into phosphoenol pyruvate, and finally phosphoenol pyruvate is converted into pyruvate. All these steps are reversible except number 1, 3 and 10. The first three steps are called energy investment phase. Step 4 and 5 are called cleavage phase, and the steps from 6 to 10 are the energy generation phase. Now let's see what are the net ATP produced through aerobic and anaerobic glycolysis. In the first step, as this is in the investment phase, one ATP is converted into one ADP. So in both aerobic and anaerobic, one ATP is utilized. In the third step, again, one ATP is converted into one ADP, and in the both aerobic and anaerobic process, one ATP is utilized. In the sixth step, two molecules of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate are there. Actually, from this step, all the molecules are twice in number. So in this step, so here two molecules of NADH are produced from two molecules of NAD. Now here we see that if one NADH undergoes electron transport chain in the mitochondria, that will produce 3 ATP. So as two molecules of NADH are present here, it will produce 6 molecules of ATP in this step in aerobic glycolysis. However, as in anaerobic glycolysis there is no mitochondria, the NADH cannot be transported to mitochondria, rather it is oxidized back to NAD in the cytoplasm without producing any ATP. So in anaerobic, the ATP production will be 0 in this step. Okay, now in the next step, two molecules of ATP are produced from two ADP, and this is for both the aerobic and anaerobic process. Just like this, in the final step, again two molecules of ATP are produced from two ADP, both in aerobic and anaerobic process. Now, if we count what we find here, from aerobic it is plus 8, and from anaerobic it is plus 2. So net ATP produced through aerobic glycolysis is 8 and anaerobic glycolysis is only 2. Alright, I hope by now you understand how glycolysis occurs and what are the numbers of ATP produced through this process. Now you should know about its regulation, how the glycolysis inside our body is regulated, when to make the process faster and when to make it slower. I hope you liked the video. If you have any question, just put a comment and click the subscribe button for more videos. Thank you.